It should be recording now. Okay, so like I said, the IRS modules, you just kind of, hit through those. And I tried to set these up as like individual modules within the week.
Yes.
So it didn't seem so overwhelming, because if I put that whole list, as soon as you popped into it, it would be, oh my goodness, I have to do all of this in 1 week. And so chapter 1, and you got your introduction done, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that was, let me go back in that way.
Yeah, I want to know why all these students that I can see on there look so young.
Most of them are. So yeah, so just, and this first one is just, and this was just your first initial way to kind of create, how do I create a voice thread? You got to practice at least with something, that you're comfortable with, just talking about yourself, versus jumping right into an assignment, because a lot of our assignments, you have to create a presentation. But then that way, that was just a starter, so to speak, and then just view others, and then let me get out of here. Okay, so then in chapter 1, it just kind of hits the high points on there. And the main thing, I think, in chapter 1 for me is really talking about what is RTI, because, and you'll see, since you're going back in the classroom, that's very, very predominant. RTI is not special ed. It's before you ever even get to special ed.
Right.
And so that chapter 1 just kind of really hits the RTI. So that RTI piece will come back to us, and they'll talk about RTI through all of these chapters.
Okay.
As well. So like I said, just, think about, what's RTI? How am I going to use RTI especially to assess and move students where they need to be in reading? And then you had one of the IRS modules was RTI, and then the second was classroom assessment. And a lot of these skills and instructional strategies that you'll learn in this chapter can be transferred to any content area.
Right. I picked up on that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can use those for any content. So it's not just, I can only do this in reading. No, you can do this math, social studies, science. But of course, your main, especially in early grades, your main thing is going to be reading and math. Anyway, you'll still do, but you'll see more and more in the classroom, they're teaching reading using the content area. So we may be teaching reading, but using social studies content to teach reading.
Right.
Or using science content to teach reading. So you're kind of getting both.
Right. And I love how this model, I can see how this could easily be applied to math too, because I've tutored math for 10 years and just one-on-one, but I can see in the classroom how that would really be useful in your math teaching too.
Yes. So that's kind of hit on chapter 1. Okay, chapter 2. Chapter 2's got a big assignment in it, in which you've finished yours, but it's that phonemic awareness and being able to do the phonemes and creating that voice thread. I think you've already turned yours in, hadn't you?
I did, but I finished that first day because I knew I'm just trying to, like I said, really buckle down since I'm going to be gone for over a week here, and by the time I passed that, but by the time I tested, it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I thought I should just close this down, but I was so close to finishing, and I knew the next day I'd have to get some things ready for being gone. But so yeah, that really was interesting. I love that.
Yeah, went back and forth, but one of the skill sets that you need to have to be able to teach reading is this. That's probably the most important skill set, is being able to correctly pronounce phonemes. Because if you teach kids incorrectly, then that just sets them up for failure in their whole reading career. So this is probably the most important assignment that we do, this and the Reading Horizons, which I think you finished that already too.
Oh, that's the one I was up till 11 o'clock at night on. Yes. Yeah. That was one of my favorite parts that I've done so far.
Yeah, it really, and you'll see as you finish these chapters how all of that is mixed in with that. It's the whole entire thing. It's just a really good, I really like the Reading Horizons program. It really gives you how do I use this? Not only am I reading this material, but actually how do I put it in practice and
Right.
see how you can put it in practice? And okay, what exactly does it mean to be able to do phonics and
Right.
phonemes? Because we think we know until we start
Right.
working on it. We realize, oh, I forgot all of this.
Yeah, I saw that a lot in my kindergarten class this year because the teacher that I work with is really great. We both had small groups going at the same time, and it was really neat to see how these kids were learning to pronounce these, and all the errors that it said that would come up with children. I saw
Mm-hmm.
this year. It was really, really. I thought it was very practical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had a lot of. I'll have kids who will be in a practicum somewhere, and they may be in the early grade, and they'll be doing this reading horizons. They're like, "Oh man, we're going to practice what we learned in that today with these kids," because it's very practical. It's very transferable right to the classroom.
Right. When they were learning to sound out and doing their initial writing, how they would sound out words or segment words and then write them. And if they did not sound those letters out correctly, they had like 3 extra U's in their word because they put an after every
Mm-hmm.
consonant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that blending and segmenting are the two great skills when it comes to when you're putting words together. And then you'll see as this, and since you've had experience in going through the classroom, what it looks like to actually teach reading, how all those 5 essentials blend together. And if you're weak in one, it really kind of messes up the chain, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And they really do build upon each other. So if you don't have good fluency, it's really hard to have, you don't have good vocabulary or good comprehension. Or if you don't have good phonemic awareness, your fluency, if you're constantly trying to sound out words, you'll never become a fluent
Right.
reader. So, but then this one, and there was a hiccup whenever I was, this class, this is exactly the same assignments that we do in the regular semester. And I know it seems so overwhelming, but I have to, when I teach in a regular semester, I have to teach in the summer too. That's the whole idea.
Uh-huh.
And I had put the PALS module in this one and in week 3. So I took it out of week 3. I double, put it there twice.
Oh, okay.
But there's a PALS 2 through 6 that we have to do, but then there's the K1. But this one, I'd already put it here and people had already turned it in, but it really probably should have went in week 3. It really hits that beginning reading, but it's not going to hurt you to,
Right.
because you're going to see this, because this PALS stuff is a strategy for teaching that phonemic awareness and those kinds of things. So it's fine.
Now, could you ever go back and relook at those once you've been through them? Can you go back and relook at those?
Yes. So, a year from now, you're like, man, I really need to touch up on that. Just go to we'll just click on there. You can just go to the Iris Peabody Vanderbilt. You don't have to have a login or anything. You can just go to Resources, Iris Resource Locator, and it has every type of topic that you can think of. So let's just click on Reading Literacy. Okay, so here's all the different modules that are connected to reading, literacy, and language arts. And we'll probably do a lot of these. We do the CSR, the Reading Comprehension Strategy. We do the Classroom Assessment, which is evaluating reading programs, which we just did in Chapter 2. I don't do anything in writing in this class. We don't do this one. We hit some of these in other classes in our special ed. We'll do the PALS, a reading strategy for grades 2 through 6. That's the other PALS, and then the PALS K through 1. And then a reading strategy for high school. And I do this one in the secondary class that I teach.
Okay.
And then there are several different RTIs. So if you're not in those other classes, but you want to know more, you can go through there and just click on them and go through the modules yourself. You don't have to have a login. There's nothing that goes with it. They also have the case studies, which we'll do 2 of these. We will do fluency and word identification and comprehension and vocabulary.
Okay.
And it's just those instructional strategies. How do I teach that? And I really like the case studies because they give you a scenario. So this is the type of kids you have in your class. How are you going to teach them?
Right.
Using those strategies.
I can see this would be a tool that teachers would go back to if you're struggling with something. Kind of like a
Mm-hmm.
little mini lesson, you know,
It
when you do
is.
lessons in the classroom, a little mini lesson for the teachers.
It is. And then there's activities that you can do yourself. They have, and so like here's how do I do mnemonic strategies, note taking. Here's where you can get a lot more information, just comprehension, just, you know, to want to know more about those. These are just, I mean, they have all of them.
Wow.
And then let's see here. Interviews that you can watch and see everything is just nicely. And then here's just some little video pieces. And I always wish, you know, people would go and look at those. So if you're struggling, especially if you have trouble understanding textbooks, go and watch some of these and say, okay, PALS. I want to see how PALS is used. So you can watch PALS in the video and see, oh, that's how they use that.
Mm-hmm.
And then web resources. So this is a lot of great, especially when we're going to, we'll be doing some research strategies and you'll be looking up that kind of stuff. These are great resources for that as well. And then that is diagnostic reading practices. So you can, how to diagnose a struggling reader. You can learn how to do that through that module. So the IRIS is like I said, a really good tool to use even when you are finished teaching to go back to. And I'll have students all the time too. And I went back and went through one of those IRIS modules because I couldn't remember how to do this, but it's always there for you even when you graduate.
Right, that's awesome.
And it has all the different types of, you know, assessment's a huge one, assistive technology, behavior and classroom management. There's lots of great, and I always tell people, just because this is geared towards special education works for all students.
Right.
If it'll work for special ed, then it works for all. So, you know, don't let it, you know, if you don't have kids who are in special ed, it doesn't matter. These strategies and resources will work for them too.
Right.
Regardless. All right, so that kind of hits chapter 2, and then we look at, so all of that is due by Sunday, which I think you're pretty much caught up on and have all that. And that Reading Horizons, and for those of you that will watch this video, do not wait till the last minute. You need to be working on this every day. It's about a 5-hour course that you'll have to go through, and you got to make at least an 85 on the test, but you can keep retaking the test till you hit 85. And it does have some nuances, like if you don't type it in correctly, it won't count it right.
Yeah, I found that out.
yeah, and that's nothing I can fix because that's Reading Horizons, but it does have some nuances. But if you look past the nuances, it's a great workshop to go through, and you do get a certificate at the end, so you can put that in your portfolio to say, okay, you know, I've completed this. You have something else to show an employer, because a lot of schools will use this as professional development for their teachers. So it's a great resource for that. And then looking at next week, and I leave all of these are open, so if you can jump ahead. You know, you don't have to say, okay, well, I'm done with week 1. Let me wait till next week before I start week 2. No, you can jump ahead and go at your own pace. You just have to be finished with each of those. You know, it's not finished by the end of the course, but finished by each of those due dates. And so then when you look in chapter 3, I did take out the PALS K1. We do not have an exam or midterm. So you'll notice if you watch the introduction video, that's the one that just came from my, that's the only thing that's different. You don't have a quiz for chapter 3 or chapter 4. Those are very massive chapters. If you've started reading them, I mean, they put in a lot of information, and I just don't feel like you can retain that enough to take a quiz in 1 week. But the idea here is to understand what are some, it really talks about assessment in this one too, and how do you teach reading. So this is where you get to use Google Scholar, and if you haven't ever used Google Scholar, this video here will show you exactly how to set it up on your computer and then be able to use. And then these are other little videos from APA that will help. You know, how do I format? How do I do an in-text citation? What is APA? And then you'll do the brain research in reading. And this one is just you read this and then find another article and then talk about the implications, because brain research in reading is the going thing for that. Have you any questions over that chapter?
I don't think so. I haven't dived into that yet.
Okay. That just kind of gives, and then these are just some short little videos that you can watch as you can see a teacher teaching these. How do I teach exception words? How are you teaching sight words? Those kinds of things. And those videos are also, they came from your textbook. So if you got the electronic version of the textbook, which you are not required to, so I try to post them on here. Usually they'll have a little link in that electronic piece that you can click on and watch these videos. Some of the links have broken, so I've had to delete them because there's no way for me to fix them because they come from the textbook.
Oh, okay.
So, and I think you had asked me about one, it seems like.
I forget which one.
Yeah, but I had to take it out because it came from the textbook itself, so there's no way to fix it. I don't know where the original was. So, but the main thing for chapter 3 is doing that implications for brain research, especially in that early reading. And then we get to chapter 4, advanced. And this again hits the older, once you get out of that phonemic awareness phase and you're really building on fluency, and those advanced reading skills, because you're working on, and all these you're working simultaneously on. You don't just say, okay, we're just going to do phonemic awareness and that's it. Then we're going to do phonics instruction, or then we're going to do fluency. You're always working on these together, but you may put more emphasis on one versus the other. And this one is where you see that next IRIS module, that PALS.
Okay.
So it talks about that advanced piece. But you have 2 presentations for this one. One is effective spelling instruction. And I'm a firm believer in, and you teach reading and spelling simultaneously.
Okay.
We don't just teach reading and then go back and teach spelling. They go hand in hand. Like you were talking about, if a kid didn't have good phonemic awareness skills, when they were spelling out beginning writing,
yes,
they were misspelling all the words, but
yes,
that was because they didn't have good phonemic awareness. And so, like I said, they go hand in hand. And you'll see it, and I hope everyone who comes through this class gets away from let's just give the weekly spelling test on Friday, and that's all we do for spelling.
Right.
But this is, when you read the book, you'll see what's good about doing spelling and what's bad, and how you can implement spelling into everything you do. And it's not just a weekly spelling test. I mean,
right,
we still do it. I did it as a teacher.
Right. I'm interested to get into this because as I talked to the teacher who taught 4th grade last year, and she gave me all of her stuff, that's exactly what she did, a weekly spelling test. They did it on Monday, and whichever words you missed, then you tested on those on Friday.
Mm-hmm. And that's just memorization.
Right. Yes.
You're not actually building those effective skills, because if you know your phonemes and you know how words are structured by the way they sound, then your spelling sort of comes with that.
Right. So I'm anxious to dive into that because
and there's, like I said, there's lots of ways that the book does a good job at talking about. But on this one, you'll find an article that talks about spelling instruction and how we should do it. That's research based. Mm-hmm. And look at that, and you'll just read it and summarize it, and how it relates to what the textbook says we should be doing for effective spelling. And you'll just do a presentation. So you just do a PowerPoint.
Okay.
You just do a PowerPoint and you just talk through it as if these presentations are just like if we were in class. So if we had this face-to-face, then you would stand up in front of the class and give a presentation.
Okay.
So that's all this is. That way you still get that interaction, even though this is an online class. And then once everybody's posted theirs, you'll just kind of go in and look at someone else's and comment on theirs and say, okay, I really like how you did this. How do you think this could be used in a fourth grade reading class or a sixth grade, because we even do spelling all the way up through middle school. Usually high school we don't. It's more of a vocabulary test and not necessarily spelling.
Right.
But generally speaking, we expect students to spell all those words correctly, even though they're not technically spelling tests. So how can I use this all the way up? Because this class really covers K through 12.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see a lot of reading instruction in the upper grades as much as you see you're working on comprehension and vocabulary, is where those skills are more focused, but not to say that those other skills are not needed.
Right. And I think spelling is something that's gone by the wayside, definitely.
Well, it's because we've got to the way of where we just do a weekly spelling test and it's memorization. You can memorize pretty much anything short term.
Right.
But how do you develop skills, a skill set that will carry with that child? And I'm a horrible speller. I'm a horrible speller. And I know it was because we didn't learn phonemic awareness. I was in the shift of, it was all sight words. Right. It was whole word learning. And that's why I'm a terrible speller. It's because I never had phonemic awareness. Mm-hmm. That was in a shift. We've shifted, between how we teach reading and how we especially, this was 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. We've learned a lot since then about reading and and that's where it gets back to that other, where they've really taken in that, looking at the brain and how the brain reacts to learning reading. But also in this module, this kind of comes back to that RTI. So now we've learned enough through those first 4 chapters to do an article about RTI. So this one, you'll look at a model of RTI, and you'll compare and contrast between what your textbook talks about and what your article talks about, and then you'll just kind of do a presentation over that. And I hope it'll be interesting to see, because everybody should have the same coming from the textbook. There's so many different research things out there. What does your research say? Right. What does your research say? Especially when you're dealing with reading. How do you go about providing RTI in reading? Mm-hmm. What is the progress monitoring that goes on in that? At what level do you change students to which tier? So this should be a real interesting activity. And like I said, RTI is here to stay. You will be doing it if you're teaching, and it's not special ed, because students from special ed do not get RTI. They get special education. Mm-hmm. And everybody does RTI tier 1. That's just whole class instruction. So how do you decide when a student needs to move to tier 2? And then if they're in tier 2, how do you decide when a student needs to move to tier 3? And what are we teaching in tier 2 and tier 3 that's different than tier 1? Right. So
I'm anxious to get to this part, because I thought taking a summer course, I would miss all that interaction with the other students. And so now that's happening. So that's awesome, because you get information from you get information from the text, plus all these other research that these people are bringing into their presentations. So
exactly. And you should be able, and you can go through and read all of them, but you on this one, I want you to comment and look at least 2 of your classmates. Okay. Because I'm hoping that's going to provide a rich engagement for you to say, okay, what's all the research out there saying? Because that's a heavily researched topic, is RTI. Mm-hmm. Especially since federal law in special education, before you can be diagnosed with a learning disability, you have to go through RTI. A student does. Okay. Or some other mode that is similar to RTI. Now, it's funny, here in Indiana calls RTI something different than what even myself and most other researchers. RTI is really response to intervention. So we've identified that you have a weakness, and now we're treating that, right, so to speak. Indiana RTI is response to instruction. Oh. So it's a little bit different. So if you hear in Indiana, they call it response to instruction. So this is really when it starts off in tier 1. So how are you responding to the instruction that you're given? Do you need a different type of instruction? So like I said, Indiana's a little bit different, but you wouldn't see if you look up RTI, everybody else calls it response to intervention.
Okay.
Because we're providing you some type of treatment. It's some prescribed program or prescribed strategy to teach these students in this either tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, and how they're responding to the treatment.
Yeah.
You know, are they getting better? Or are they not?
Yeah.
And really, I don't know why Indiana calls it response to instruction, and what they were doing with that, but just know if you're in an Indiana classroom, they call it response to instruction,
Okay.
not response to intervention. If you don't learn anything else, you learn that RTI is response to instruction in Indiana.
I like this. It reminds me of like a medical doctor where, you try one medicine, if it doesn't work, try a different medicine. If that doesn't work, then you always.
And that's exactly what RTI is. And what works for one kid may not work for the next kid.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Is there something wrong with that kid? Well, no. They just their brain can't take that treatment. And and as teachers, we have to do it with fidelity. We have to make sure that it's not on our end,
right? Which
is kind of what Indiana's response to intervention. It's not on our end that the treatment's not getting delivered correctly. So if we're delivering the treatment correctly, the students are still not getting it. That's when we get to the point where we finally say, okay, maybe it's not of a lack of instruction as why students not learning to read. It's actually because they have a learning disability, which a reading disability is what we call dyslexia in special education. And there's misconceptions that dyslexia is, people flip words backwards. No, yes, that may be part of it. But if a student has a reading disability, it's dyslexia is what we call it. If it's diagnosed as a reading disability, that they're dyslexic. And but we have to go through that RTI and make sure it wasn't a lack of instruction, because if student hasn't been taught their phonemes, then it messes everything up. They can't do fluency, they can't do comprehension. So is it really that the student, their brain can't intercept and there's a disconnect in the brain, or is it because it was a lack of instruction?
Okay.
So that's what you're really trying to figure out. Is it a lack of instruction, or is there actually a disconnect in the brain? And most of the time it's from lack of instruction.
Okay.
And it'll talk about students at risk and the number of words they were just exposed to in those early. That's why, we tell parents, read to your child, read to your child, read to your exposure is the greatest thing to overcome difficulty in reading. It's because they haven't been exposed to the words, so they don't know the words.
Right.
And even when they see a picture or they see the word, they can't put 2 and 2 together. They've never had exposure.
Right.
And even reading to older grades. I mean, I read to high school students. I taught high school. I read to high school students. And they loved being read to. Still loved it.
Yeah. Even studies have shown that people with Alzheimer's even will calm down if you're reading to them. So it never stops. People love to be read to, no matter what age.
That's right. So then once we get to week 3, we really start hitting the ground running, so to speak, with those 5 essentials. We talk about fluency here, which fluency is the ability to recall words without having to sound them out. And we should all be fluent readers when we read out loud and it just kind of fluently goes through. And everybody can think of an example of a student or have heard a reader who is not fluent.
Right, yes.
And I'll say this real quick, so those that are watching. Round robin reading is terrible if you've got a struggling reader in your class. Do not force a child to read out loud that does not have excellent fluency. That's nothing more detrimental and will turn a child against reading is having to struggle and have kids make fun of them when they're trying to sound out words and read. It's horrible. Horrible, horrible. Now, if you're working in a small group intervention, you can have them read out loud to you because you're working on that fluency. That's how you have to read out loud to work on your fluency.
Right. But
don't do it in front of the whole entire class and have a student, I can think of even in high school you know, you knew who were good readers and who weren't, and who would take forever to read their passage, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's nothing worse for a kid to have to go through that.
How often do you suggest like testing kids for their fluency?
Well, it just depends on where they're at. So if you've put them in RTI, then you're going to be testing them probably weekly in progress monitoring.
Okay.
You're going to have them read a passage. There's usually, and you can send it home. Now, this is what I've seen my son's teacher did, and I really, really did like it. Every week she sent home a passage, and they had to read it out loud to me. And he had 1 minute, so they'd time it 1 minute, and he would read out loud. And then we'd have to mark the number of words where he got.
Mm-hmm.
You know, write that down. Then he would turn around and have to do it again. So then he'd read it the second time. Now, of course, you would hope that he's already read through it the first time, and it's what we call cold reading.
Okay.
You don't let them practice it before. You really want to get an idea of fluency is you give them a cold reading, something that they haven't read before. You time them for a minute and see how many words they got right.
Okay.
And then and there is a list of, you know, where a child should be, especially when you're using a prescribed. In this passage, a fluent reader should get X number of words, you know, per minute.
Mm-hmm.
And you just kind of have to go through and, you know, whatever you're using. I can't tell you, it's 200 words. It's
Right.
You know, because it depends on the vocabulary words you're using.
Yeah.
But then they'll read it the second time. So it's not a code read. So they've already stumbled through the words, or they know what words, or they know what hiccups. And most of the time, the second time, they'll have a greater number read in that minute.
Okay.
So you can constantly test kids at home. And that's a great informal assessment to use to say, okay, how's, you know, little Johnny doing? Well, little Johnny only got 20. But Sam over here, he had 60. You know,
mm-hmm.
That's a key. Say, okay, you know, little Johnny's struggling here. I need to work with him, because it's hard for us as teachers. We've got a classroom of 25 kids,
Right.
to bring them up to our desk and have them do a cold read,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Once a week. You know, it's just not feasible. We may do, you know, a couple here, a couple here, a couple here, but especially if I can send something home like that and kind of get an idea. Okay, who do I need to be looking at? Who do I need, you know, that they may need some extra instruction. I need to move them to tier 2 or recommend them for tier 2.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great way, an easy way. That's a simple, easy way. It's part of homework. We do it every week. And I can see, and then you can chart those and keep a log on those. It's okay, you know, are they building fluency?
Mm-hmm.
You know, as the weeks progress. Exactly. Now, parents may not know what you're doing it for, and it'd be a good idea to test. And we're testing for reading fluency.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we want to know, and it's not necessarily about how fast you can read. I mean, yes, it is, but it's being able to go through and be a smooth read.
Right.
You know, did they struggle? And you may ask questions that, did the student struggle? You know, if they did, were there certain words that the student struggled on? And it may be the same word, maybe a hiccup word and you may include your vocabulary words for that week in that read. And usually that's what happens too. So you're working on vocabulary. And then you may also ask them, throw in a couple comprehension questions. Say, okay, what was this about?
Right.
So, because a lot of students can recall, which is they have great fluency. I mean, they can read anything you put out in front of them with, just pristine, no errors whatsoever. But then they have no idea what they read.
Oh, uh-huh.
And that's where that comprehension, because they're so focused on fluency, on just getting the words right and reading it smoothly, they have no idea what they read. And I have college students that are like that. Mm-hmm. They're like, I can read, and I have no idea what I read. And then that's built, and that's when we get into week 5, is how do we build comprehension? And doing all these simultaneously. Like I said, you just don't build one skill at a time. They're all simultaneous.
Right.
But like I said, this chapter is over. This is where we get our first case study, which is on fluency and word identification. So it's really going to give you some sample cases of a student. It's also going to give you some strategies for working on fluency. but then it's going to ask you to implement those, and how would you do that kind of thing. And then I have just a sample here of how to set it up, because there's different levels in different cases, and just make sure you tell me it's level A, case 1, and then write your questions with the answers.
Okay.
Then level A, case 2, because otherwise it gets all jumbled up and I have no idea which one you're talking about.
Right.
So, and you'll do that on both case studies.
Okay.
Like I said, then we get to that. This is where PALS 2-3 is, and then we do have a quiz over chapter 5. And in all those quizzes, you can use your books and your notes, your PowerPoint, whatever. It doesn't really, I don't have any preference. This isn't a memorization thing. It's really just, a lot of the questions are application questions. You'll see too. So then we get to vocabulary. Same idea. Here are some teaching channel videos. If you haven't ever used the teaching channel, it's a great resource. They give you lots of teaching strategies, and it's not just, oh, here's a teaching strategy. You actually see a teacher teaching that strategy in the classroom. Mm-hmm. So you can actually see what it looks like. And then we're going to do a vocabulary selection activity, which it has it talks about peer tutoring. And peer tutoring is a great way to have students work with each other in the classroom. But this gives you a summary. So this one you're actually going to write a paper on.
Okay.
You're going to summarize the article on one page, describe a vocabulary used for peer tutoring. Oh, I got a meeting in 10 minutes.
Oh, whoops.
And then, I have my class in 10 minutes. And then reading strategies presentation. So this one I really, really like, because this talks about children who live in poverty mirror students who are English language learners. Wow. And our students who live in poverty are usually put on the at-risk. I mean, they're always at risk. And there's so many reasons why, because poverty. But this is an interesting, and you'll just do a presentation where you'll just do a PowerPoint and kind of set that up. And then a quiz. And I'm kind of going through these fast because I'll try to do one of these meetings every week to answer specific, but I just wanted to kind of give everybody an overview too, because I've had questions about how the structure of the class was going. And then it's really heavy the first 2 weeks, and then it kind of slows down a little bit the last 3 weeks. But then you've got, here's some more IRIS modules, and these are specific strategies that you use to teach comprehension in those. And then you have your last case study, which will kind of cover that vocabulary and comprehension. And then your chapter 7 quiz, and then your reading horizons is due by the end of the semester, and you upload your certificate. So you either take a snapshot picture or download the PDF and upload the PDF to me for your certificate on that. So now that's the quick version. Have you got any other specific questions or things you want me to answer? Especially about week 1 or week 2.
I think once we dive into it more, then it's like we don't know what we don't know yet. That's
exactly right. And so, like I said, I'll try to hold one of these online every week, and I'll try to vary the times and days. That way, if people have questions, they can hop on. Or if I have anybody who sends me a question, you can ask. And someone had asked about, let me answer that question really quick. On the IRIS module, on the classroom assessment, question number 3 was about evaluating a reading program. Well, all you have to do is just literally Google search, look for a reading rockets is an example of one. And you can decide on this module how you're going to assess. You can look at their phonemic awareness, or you're going to look at their vocabulary, or you're going to look at their, you're going to pick one of the 5 essentials pretty much. And then you just go through and it's kind of like a checklist that does this program do this? Does this program do this? Yes or no? And why you think that it exceeds or it meets those standards, so to speak. Because there's a lot of reading programs out there. They're very scripted, and they'll say, okay, if students go through this program, they're going to build, excellent vocabulary skills or whatever. So it's just being able to evaluate, okay, is this an effective program? Is it not? So whoever had that question, I hope that answers you. If not, let me know and we can maybe meet individually and work on that together. But if anybody ever has any questions about any of this or needs more instruction, don't hesitate to ask me. We can set up a meeting and talk. I do serve as the facilitator for this online class because it is an online class, and I do have it set kind of where it's at your pace. You know, if you ever run into struggles, just let me know. And if some of you, this may not be the best way to learn for you. This class is only offered online. I try to offer it as many different types of experiences for you as I can, whether it be you have some videos to watch. Of course, you can read the chapter. The voice threads are pretty much a audio version of the PowerPoint. So if you just need to hear it versus you don't really want to read through the PowerPoint, then listen to the audio version. I do throw in a few extra things that are in the chapter, but if you're fine with reading it and just having the PowerPoint beside you, you don't need to go through the voice thread lecture. It just depends on how you learn best for you. And and even Becky said this, there's a lot in these chapters. Take it for what it is and keep this book, because there's no way you'll ever get all of this information and know it by heart in 5 weeks. Keep the book. You know, there's the main specific things and kind of where our presentations and those are the real gist of what I really need you to get, and plus the IRIS modules. If you can get those things down pretty good, then you'll have a good foundation for reading instruction. Becky, is there anything else I can answer for you or anything?
I don't think so right now. I think you've covered a lot.
Okay, well, I hope it's a little clear. And then in the course calendar, someone kept asking me about modules, and I think they're asking me about IRIS modules because each chapter is set up as a module. So in the week 1, you do have 3 IRIS modules to complete. You've got the RTI 3, the classroom assessment, and the PALS. And you do have to do the phonings, voice thread test, and introduce yourself. So try to and you can almost check these off where, you know, the bubbles, print it off, check it off, and say, okay, have I got everything done? If for some reason I left something off here, what's on Blackboard supersedes what's on the course calendar. Okay. I think I have everything on there. If you find something that's not, let me know so I can add it. This is all, and I always put last time I updated. So if you printed one of these off this past weekend, it's already changed because I had to delete. I had PALS K1 here and PALS K1 here. I had it on there twice. So like I said, there are 2 PALS. You've got 2 through 6 and K through 1. Okay. Like I said, if you run into something now, I don't have it listed on here, just let me know. But do know what is listed. Ooh, I lost it. What is listed here as your assignments supersedes what's in the course calendar. So if it's on here to do, then make sure you do it. All right, well, if I don't have any other questions, I'll send out an email and let you guys know when we can meet next week. If there's something specific that you think works better for you, just shoot me an email, let me know. I'll try to do my best to schedule around that. My kids are in ball games and all that kind of stuff, so it's sometimes hard to say, okay, we're going to meet every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Because sometimes we have games and things like that. So I just try to hit it the best I can. Becky, if you don't have any other questions, I will talk to you guys later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.